we've got Alex Altman, the COO of Validation Cloud, to talk about web infrastructure and security in terms of node and staking as data as a service. Alex Altman is the COO of Validation Cloud, and he's as a bit of a background, they're an established leader in the crypto space. They've provided validation services for countless chains. They're one of the blue chip validators in the space. So I'm very glad to have him here. And as a piece of background, Alex has spent over 6 years as an executive and investor in the space. So I'm welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing from you and doing our little rant. So yeah, happy to take it as you'd like to present, and yeah, kick it off, man.
For sure. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about Validation Cloud, what we do. Happy to have you jump in with any questions for anyone watching.
Great.
So as you said, myself, I've been in the crypto space 6 years, mostly on the infrastructure and investment side of things. And we've been paying attention to Avalanche for quite a lot of time. And we're very excited to be on the validation side of things, as well as the RPC and node side of things. So Validation Cloud itself, again, been around for about 5 years. 5 years at this point. We were one of the first oracles on Chainlink. We were a pre-testnet participant for Polygon, for Flow, more recently Aptos, Axelar, and of course we're on Avalanche as well. We really like to get involved with projects that we have a belief for a long-term sustainability and people who are really changing the space. And the team that we're made up of is a mix of Web3 companies, you can see at the bottom there, as well as Web2. So we've taken some of the best principles of Web2 and Web3 when designing our architecture and how that can apply to Avalanche and the subnet architecture specifically. So for us, when we look at the blockchain space now, I think we're definitely leaving the place where it was a lot of hobbyists. It was initial people coming in to experiment with the technology. We as a company really think that the next billion users are going to come from enterprise adoption and large scale institutional usage. So at this point in time, the vast majority of top 500 companies out there are playing with blockchain in one way or another, whether that's a private chain, think like a Hyperledger, or starting to mess around on public chains as well. And we think that the subnet model, and we'll just talk a little bit about it afterward, is a premier way for them to experience Web3 in the best possible format. So we've done a couple different articles talking about what the value of an app chain is, how to apply to different portions of the industry, and then also specifically did an article, I'll talk about after, about Avalanche and the various subnets that are going on there and some of the different use cases that we've seen, and then also how our technology applies to that, and more importantly, how infrastructure becomes a core element of what you need to do as a subnet, either provider or a subnet user or developer, and then how that kind of works with our systems.
Also, I'd love to get those links, so I'll share them in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. I can send them afterward. We've got a couple different blogs talking about some of the other app chain providers, and Avalanche was our kind of first and premier group that we showcased here. So we actually put one out. We were lucky enough to be able to talk to some of the different subnets that are actually building on top of Avalanche, some of which are live at the moment, some of them are still testnet. But we really made an effort to not only showcase the technology that Avalanche was building, but also the different facets that you can use it. So we were able to talk to someone in the DeFi space, someone in more of the regulated real world asset space, as well as the GameFi space. And then we spoke to them about, why are they using Avalanche? What advantages do they find? And how are they applying those advantages to their respective industry? So here, as I was mentioning, Dexalot is obviously in the decentralized finance space. When you're looking at DeFi, people really need to value, one, speed of transaction. How quickly can you recognize what type of transactions are there? Liquidations for DeFi or arbitrage opportunities, or merely just conducting how much slippage essentially is there in DeFi if you want to conduct a trade on your own. And the ability to do that in a very quick manner significantly enhances a user or a platform's ability to either provide that to their customer or as a user to be able to execute on various different trading strategies. The other part that I think is very important that Avalanche offers, and I'll get more into about how we provide for that, is that for decentralized finance, people have seen a lot in Ethereum. You can essentially get clogged up with gas prices. There's also a lot of a lot more requirements and infrastructure load when there's volatility in the market. So being able to address that to provide a seamless and consistent experience to your users is very important. And I believe that Subnet does that by allowing for a lot of composability when it comes to designing how you're actually going to let your users interact with that. The second group that we spoke to is a company called Balcony DAO. It's a real estate firm out of New York and New Jersey, and they're looking at putting real-world assets onto the blockchain, so tokenizing different assets there, and significantly more concerned about elements of compliance. Who can actually see this data, who can interact with the data, and then how can I still get the benefits of Web3 but still maintain my area of kind of private systems. So the hybrid type approach, which we're seeing a lot of success with, particularly when you're looking at either regulated enterprises or other enterprises that have kind of this real world asset bent to them. And finally, we spoke to a gaming-based chain. Again, when you look at the world, like projects that want to create a Web3 game, you have to have this type of infrastructure that Avalanche can allow you to create, so that, again, you can create this consistent experience for people in global usership, right? Essentially, in its gaming nature, it's a global phenomenon. So people from all over the world play. So you have different infrastructure needs, both at different times of day, in different regions, to allow for people to have that consistent element, so that if you're playing in North America, just because a lot more people are playing in North America, you shouldn't be experiencing lag or higher gas fees or something like that compared to someone in Europe or Asia, because there's less people playing. And then in a gaming side of things, you want to be able to both have your area where you can create that really fast, low latency gaming experience, but then allow people to trade their NFTs or characters or whatever it is, gaming assets they've created, into the wider Web3 world. So here are the 3 C's of where we think the value in the subnet architecture is. Composability. So being able to choose things like, do you want a token? Do you want to connect to the main validators? How much gas fees should you charge? Should there be no gas fees? How fast should things go? How many regions should you be in? And the subnet architecture really allows for that type of composability for all these different designers, which is very important when you want to create something that may need a ton of horsepower, may need very little. But the choice, I think, is really what's the killer application here. The compliance element as well. I talked about the real world assets. People are using elements like Hyperledger, R3, or Corda, but they don't get the benefit of, one, the liquidity or the interactivity between other blockchains or Avalanche. And therefore, they're sort of stuck within their own space, and they're just using this private ledger. But being able to have your own space where you can choose where are people coming from, who could see that data. There's kind of geofencing, OFAC, SOC, and all these other different types of accreditations that these different enterprises require in order to be able to transact on blockchain, which is really what was driving a lot of these groups into a private blockchain in the first place, right? I think most people really are interested in public blockchain or some version of public blockchain that allows them to, as I said, interact with everybody and use a lot of the great open source work that people have done, but they can't do so in a compliant way because there's transactions from around the world. So this ability to have your compliant blockchain is very important, and that also leads into confidentiality. There's a lot of different businesses that require that type of ledger, but they can't necessarily let people know what exactly those transactions were for. It could be a safety concern, it could be a violation of some form of rule they have with financial information, it could be user information. So the ability to keep your transactions either quiet or sort of nondescript enough that it doesn't impede your business. Think supply chain. You need to know where everything is going if you're using a blockchain, but you don't necessarily want everybody to know where all your products are moving, where they've been, but you still want that traceability. So the confidentiality portion is another big one, and that works across a number of different industries that can utilize subnets.
Yeah, shout out to the new Spruce Evergreen subnet on Avalanche. We were just talking about that with Usman from Avalabs, and that kind of steps into where the R3 Corda Hyperledger that kind of gets into that.
Exactly. I think a lot of these enterprises really need a space to go, and that Spruce testnet is quite fantastic to actually go and see, what can I do with this? What are the limitations? What are the advantages? How can I leverage the need that we have internally for blockchain with what's publicly available, but again, in my own safe location that I have the ability to customize and and actually run. So Spruce and Evergreen, I think, are a fantastic initiative that really has the ability to ramp up Avalanche's reach within the institutional community. So when we look at what's actually required to run a successful subnet, I mean, you can have all different manners of designs and builds and elements that I discussed beforehand. We think it requires a different type of infrastructure that people are normally used to, right? The normal infrastructure is there's a single node out there, or you share a node with somebody. But the reality is, within a subnet architecture, you can also have that to be able to communicate with the broader ecosystem at large. But at the same time, you need to have a lot of control over all these different metrics I talked about before: latency, kind of white labeling, and kind of who can participate and how. So there has to be this very modular infrastructure to be able to deal with the new demands of what potential customers, users, developers, things like that are going to require. And that's where we at Validation Cloud come in. So you can think of us a little bit akin to, Cloudflare for Web3, so Content Delivery Network, or CDN. So it's very fast, scalable, and secure infrastructure that allows you to choose, again, where do you want to run validators, where do you want to run nodes, what type of information is available, how much of that information is available, and who has access to understanding what's going on in that blockchain, but also delivering that at extremely fast speeds around the world. So for us, again, going back to the architecture that we've looked at, is we've got essentially a series of interconnected nodes globally. So then that's built on top of a smart router. So essentially, no matter where you are in the world, you're actually directed to the lowest latency node near you to ensure that you're getting to the blockchain as soon as possible. That's in both a read and write capability. The other element that we've built for that is an in-house design that allows us to sync up very, very quickly to the tip of the chain. So for example, where that applies is it essentially creates a set of dynamic or elastic infrastructure that people are used to in Web 2. So think how Amazon does it, where you used to have a website, if there's too many people on it, it would just crash because they had their own infrastructure standing. Now you can actually spin up infrastructure very quickly and take it down to create a seamless experience. And something I mentioned before, the gaming examples are a very good one, where, overnight Asia would be having a lot of users, they go to bed, you don't need that much infrastructure, you spin the infrastructure down, you pick it back up in North America, and you can allow for a more bespoke options from a gaming chain, but also creates that consistent play for a gamer on DeFi or whatever it may be. So that's the system that we've designed, is this kind of global network of nodes that allows for geofencing and a number of other fun advantages, but really it's all about resilience, scalability, and speed.
Amazing.
So here, going back to the Evergreen and Spruce updates there that Avalanche have done, what we've tried to design here, and what we've, successfully designed here at Validation Cloud, is a way that these enterprises can just interact with a blockchain, and or in the subnet in this case, and design a subnet here with limited to no exposure of blockchain, not really understanding Avalanche, not really understanding kind of the specifics of how they want to build. It's more of, I just want X, Y, Z, can you do it? And so that's where we came in, is we built a system that's extremely modular, that we can take the requests of a large segment of the either Web3 population or the Web2 population, actually create and design and then deploy a subnet based on those needs. So you can see on the left, those are some of the participants in the Avalanche ecosystem from the more conventional TradFi world, who are experimenting or building on Avalanche right now. So the ability to kind of wrap their subnets in compliance and something that they can actually use, but still pull a lot of that open source software, so they can have an AMM, or they can have a lending protocol or an exchange or anything like that on top of their subnet without actually having to create significant development. So for us, is a pretty standard deployment here is speaking with customers, whoever they may be, whether it's a development group, a enterprise, someone who is looking to migrate over from a main chain over to a subnet, would be sort of design that subnet, understand how many validators, where are the validators, what is the throughput, gas, are they connecting to the main validators via a port, or are they going to have a segmented chain? And then it would be to test that by actually running the validators, checking speeds, making sure that everything is working right. And then it would be to launch that subnet and then choose between private or public endpoints. So how are you going to extract the data? Why are you going to extract the data? Who has access to that data? But then also there's a whole ecosystem that Avalanche has done a fantastic job cultivating, where you can actually connect into Avalanche Explorers, into Covalent, into a number of other providers by way of a public RPC that you can still make it limited. So in a sense, you can offer up whatever data that you want so the community can still tap into that resource with your control. But then you can also create a more limited set if it's just you and your kind of international divisions, international partners, whoever it may be. So the node service comes next. And then as a subnet begins to increase in size, and we could start providing them with data insights so they can make data-driven decisions based on how they want to grow that subnet. Do they need to change anything? Do they need to kind of move to a new location? Do they need to increase horsepower, do more validators, restrict access or increase access with nodes? But then also, allow people to go back in time and kind of review the data that's been there, so they might be able to make better decisions. Thinking a DeFi perspective, if you want to bring more traders into your system, being able to offer a structured data product so that they can actually take that, write algorithms, bringing more liquidity over to your system. So that's kind of our life cycle that we work with subnets on. And when we look at the market sizing, it's forecasted to be about 600 billion by 2025, and hitting a lot of these major points, DeFi and CeFi, obviously, you're seeing again with Evergreen coming in. DeFi itself is a $100 billion plus business, and I think Avalanche has done a good job getting people over and making it EVM compliant and building these bridges between various subnets. It's only going to increase that. Supply chain and retail, Starbucks has jumped into it. Walmart is experimenting with a number of different chains, but as I talked about before, having that privacy and confidentiality that you get from a subnet allows for these types of enterprises to move over from what could be a private chain or a private database and move over to a more hybrid approach. And of course, there's gaming. You've seen it with Ubisoft and another major other providers that are moving over into both Avalanche and other systems who like this idea of having a very consistent approach on their gaming chain so they can offer the experience they want, but then benefit from the broader ecosystem. Yeah, so that's kind of the information here. We're very excited to be part of Avalanche. We think there's a very, very bright future in terms of what they've already done and what's going on both in the test environment, the community, some of the amazing work that's been done to bring in enterprises and the developers coming into the system, building some very unique apps and bridges over to other systems that I think it really benefits the wider ecosystem and how we can support that.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much. I'd love to dive in. Can you talk to us about some of the subnets you guys are serving?
So at the moment, most of the subnets we're working with, unfortunately, are confidential as they're still being developed out.
Right on.
And I think there's still a little bit of time before they start launching. But really, we're looking more at the gaming and the real-world asset side of things. So I think in the next 6 months, we'll have some cool announcements on the Avalanche side of things. But yeah, for now, that's really main chain. And then the RPC side, we're servicing basically anyone who wants to touch the main chain at this point, whether that's a builder or user or tester, company, anything like that. But in terms of kind of running more of a full stack managed solution for subnets, the announcements are to come.
Okay, got it. Maybe can you talk about how your RPC service is like sort of resilient? I see sort of a meme trending these days, which is like decentralized RPC nodes. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can approach nodes, right? At the end of the day, a node is a gateway, but at the same time, like there's a lot of different gateways to the internet. There's broadband, but then there's all the way down to dial-up. So your access to the blockchain or internet in this case is entirely dependent on who your provider is. Fiber, or you can get wireless, whatever it may be. But in a decentralized node world, it's a fantastic way to access a blockchain. But if you don't necessarily know who your provider is, you may have problems, one, from a compliance perspective, but also from a resilience and a reliability perspective. That's obviously not to say that like within a decentralized node ecosystem, that's always going to be the case. But if there's no SLA, if you don't really know who the counterparty is, it can be difficult, particularly on an enterprise perspective, to say I'm comfortable with that, or for that to get through their system, and then creates additional hurdles. So for us, when we talk about resilience, because we've spent a lot of time automating node deployment, and we've got the protocol that I mentioned earlier on that allows us to kind of set up and essentially kill nodes very, very quickly. It means we have an automated system where if a node is malfunctioning, the node is automatically taken down. A new node is then spun up, can be synced almost automatically, so there's no latency or problems for the actual user. And that's based on the system that we actually developed. So it's quite a bit different in a sense where, like, obviously a decentralized provider has a series of different use cases. I think a centralized provider has a level of, they know what their entire network is looking like. It's much harder in a decentralized world to say, okay, well, this region is having a problem right now. Can we immediately stand up more nodes? Who is the reliable person to move that traffic to? Are you going to then oversaturate that node, particularly in less common regions?
Got it. Maybe you can go into some of your work on other chains. From Landswide's perspective, we're connecting to Cosmos chains.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of really interesting designs when it comes to app chains, right? At this point, there's subnets for Avalanche, there is parachains for Polkadot, there's the IBC solution with Tendermint, or I think zones, I believe they're called. But then there's supernets for Polygon, and the list goes on and on, right? There's a lot of different ways people are approaching it. I think the thesis is the same, right? People are really looking for their own space, but connectivity to the rest of the world there. So the work that we've done in other spaces is we are launched as a validator on a number of different sites or a number of networks that I've talked about. You can take a look at our website to see where they are. From a node perspective or RPC perspective, we launched on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and Polygon. And most recently, I think a few days ago, we've launched Aptos as well. So that's where we are on the RPC side of things. And again, it's very much a targeted based on where we see certain industry vectors going towards and how they benefit the most from our technology, right? Like, it's not necessary that everybody needs the type of connectivity that we're offering. I mean, some people do, but some people just need, a gateway that they can go to. But some are saying, I need heavy usage, I need dynamic pricing, I need global access.
Understood. Well, those are all the questions I have for you, sir. If you'd like, you could share some closing thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, as I said, I think the way of future deployments within the Web3 is really going to focus on these hybrid chains. I think there's so much that we're missing right now within the large enterprise sphere that was waiting for a solution like this. I think you're seeing that again with Spruce and Evergreen, but you're also seeing some of the major DeFi projects, some of the major gaming projects spinning out their own version of a subnet, or actually just moving to Tendermint, moving to Avalanche, because they recognize the value of being able to control your own setting while still benefiting from Web3. So I think that's something that we've identified as a huge area of growth, not just for us, but just within Web3 to kind of get to the rest of the world. So definitely something to look out for. Very excited to see what Avalanche is going to do next, and excited to participate.
All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, Alex. And if anyone has any questions, we'll put the contact info in the show notes.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, Nathan. Thanks.